I wish I had my wishes. I wish for righteous visions. I wish for 100-gallon tanks full of tropical fish.
Seasons greeting my wizards, it's Dev from SBMTG down there on the YouTube.com We Like Magic. And today, as a Christmas present for all of you, I've got a pretty cool deck tech. If you ever wanted to play with a bunch of Planeswalkers, but you just ain't got no money, I feel your pain. So today, we're going to put together a budget-ish Planeswalker deck. We're going to play Super Friends, and it's only going to cost about $100. Now, before we get to the main attraction and talk about the Planeswalkers in this Planeswalker deck, we'll talk about all the non-Planeswalker cards because they act as support to all of our Planeswalkers. We need to protect them, we need to draw into them, and all that kind of stuff. So let's talk about all those cards real quick. Alright, so since we're playing 16 total Planeswalkers in this deck, and they're all 5 of the different colors, we need to find a way to produce that mana in a budget mana base. And the best way to help us out with that is to play all 4 copies of Oath of Nissa, a whole playset of this thing, because I don't mind drawing into it if I already have one on the battlefield. We basically get to draw another card in that situation for 1 mana, and it makes all of our Planeswalkers super easy to cast, takes a lot of stress off the mana base. So I'm going to start with a full playset of this, super important. There are other ways that I want to fix our mana in this deck, both to ramp us into our 5 and 6 mana Planeswalkers. We're playing an awful lot of 6 mana cards in this deck, so I want a little bit of ramp, and again, gotta fix the mana so we can take some of the pressure off of the price tag of the mana base. So let's play 4 copies of Servant of the Conduit and 2 copies of Cultivator's Caravan. Now, Servant of the Conduit is pretty much a given, you know, it's just 2 mana for a 2/2 that'll let you have any color mana twice, which is all that we need a lot of the time in this deck, and when it does run out of energy to use to tap for mana, then you can just use it as a 2/2 to protect a Planeswalker, get in front of an attacker. Now, Cultivator's Caravan is super important. It doesn't cost us any specific color of mana to play, and it gives us whatever color mana we want, and it ramps us, and it takes, again, some pressure off of the mana base so the price tag won't be so high. All the things that are desirable, I'm going to go with a couple of copies of Caravan. Now, we're kind of thin on the 2-drops in this deck, and we can't just start the game on turn 3 or 4. That's not how Magic works, especially in this day and age. So I want something we can throw out as early as turn 2 and kind of fill the curve at 2-drop, because we don't have a whole lot of things that can protect our Planeswalkers really, really well by, you know, getting in front of attackers and stuff like that. And I think that a weird piece, but a perfect piece for the deck, is actually Consulate Sky Gate. This thing right here turns out being the cheapest piece in the entire main deck that we're playing, and it's not half bad. We can throw it out early. Doesn't matter what color mana we have out, and it can block Smuggler's Copter and not die. That's really, really good, and everything up under Smuggler's Copter as well. So Consulate Sky Gate actually not too bad, and can prevent a lot of damage over the course of the game to a Planeswalker or us. Another Oath here. At the 3-drop slot on the curve, I'm going to play 3 copies of Oath of Gideon right here. Another thing that protects our Planeswalkers, puts 2 blockers on the battlefield, that's really good, and allows a couple of our Planeswalkers to ultimate the turn they come into play. That's really, really good. So nothing wrong with Oath of Gideon. Helps our Planeswalkers out and gets us a couple of creatures on the board so that we can block for them. Definitely a few copies of this. And to finish off the non-Planeswalker cards, I'm going to play 2 copies of Deploy the Gatewatch right here. And that's right, only 2 copies, but we're drawing a bunch of cards vis-a-vis our Planeswalkers in the deck, so we got that going for us. And we don't want to draw this all game, and we've got a bunch of 6 mana cards already on the curve in the form of Planeswalkers. And I don't want to cut a Planeswalker, I'd rather cut a Deploy. So for all those reasons, and more actually, I'm just going to play the 2 Deploy, but it is obviously great when you draw into it. And if you draw into it in the late game, that's fine. We've got 6 turns to find the stinking thing anyway. Plus after that, we've got plenty of turns to go get it somehow, from card advantage from our Planeswalkers, something like that. So, not too worried about playing 3 or 4 copies of this. Our Planeswalkers do well by themselves, but when we do get a Deploy, not a bad play at all. Let's get to the heart of the matter and talk about Planeswalkers. Like I said, 16 total Planeswalkers in this budget deck is pretty good. There's a lot of actually pretty low-cost Planeswalkers in the format, starting with Nissa, Voice of Zendikar. Just a couple of copies of her. I want a 3-mana Planeswalker somewhere in this deck, and she's the cheapest and probably best in standard for her cost as far as the 3-mana Planeswalker. The other one is Saheeli Rai, and she's not amazing or anything, so didn't find room for her. The other one obviously is Liliana, but she's $40, and that's half the budget of the deck right there. So not going to play Liliana. If you have the dollars, do that. But I am going to play Nissa, Voice of Zendikar, because she's only like $5 now, and she can create little guys to block for the rest of the Planeswalkers that you're going to be playing all game. That's good. If you get enough little guys out, out, she can make them big, and her ultimate is crazy. This Planeswalker's ultimate is really good. If all you do is tick her up until you get to her ultimate, you're creating things that protect her and your other Planeswalkers, and you'll eventually get a Sphinx's Revelation type thing out of her. Late in the game, that's really good. Draw 8, gain 8. That's just insane. Her ultimate is worth playing the card by itself, not to mention that she's cheap and creates blockers for you. I don't know what's not to like. Going to 4 on the curve for our Planeswalkers, we're playing a few 4-drop Planeswalkers, starting with 2 copies of Dovin Baan in the deck. Dovin Baan is crazy. He can protect himself and other Planeswalkers for that matter pretty easily. His first ability is great. And also, being able to gain life, not bad in this deck. Drawing cards is never bad in any deck, so that's good. And we're playing a copy of Jace, Unraveler of Secrets, and their ultimates work very, very well together, shutting our opponent out of playing spells for like the rest of the game. So, and his ultimate's pretty good by itself with no help from Jace too. So I want to play at least a couple of copies of Dovin here. Card advantage is good, protecting himself is good, gaining life is good, and at least a decent ultimate. We found room in the deck for just 1 copy of Kiora, Master of the Depths, just $2, so a very attractive price tag on this Planeswalker, and definitely worth putting her in the deck because she doesn't strain, the overall cost of the deck that much. Though she doesn't do a whole lot either. One of the best things she can do, though, is to untap a Servant of the Conduit and get it back on defense after you've played a turn 3 Kiora. That's not bad at all. She can also find specific lands if you need her to do that, or she can find a Sky Gate or something like that, a Servant of the Conduit. That's not bad either. But her ultimate ain't bad either. We're not playing a ton of creatures in the deck, but all we're looking for is the 3 octopuses. And yes, it's octopuses. Octopi is not the right word. Look that up. But anyway, the 3 octopuses are pretty darn good as far as game-ending ultimates go. So if you can get her to ultimate, she can be very effective. Finish off the 4-drop Planeswalkers. I'm going to play 2 copies of Arlinn Kord, who has recently slipped to just $5.50 after being $7.58 for a long time. She's slipped and she will probably continue slipping as long as people don't play with her. A lot of these Planeswalkers have been trending downwards for some time now, and without specific help from cards in Aether Revolt, I don't see it getting any better. That's good news for us. Honestly, Arlinn Kord is still a pretty effective Planeswalker that if we're making like tokens with Nissa or something like that, she goes well with. She can make them big with one of her abilities, or she can spread the love with another ability and make all of our creatures big. She can also create creatures of her own or lightning bolt things. Her ultimate's pretty good. Just like, again, nothing not to like about Arlinn Kord. At 4 on the curve, she does a lot of things for us. Into the 5-drops here, I'm going to play 2 copies of Ob Nixilis Reignited, and I think it's one of the best Planeswalkers in the deck. Classic Planeswalker, gives us card advantage and kills creatures, in this case unconditionally, and that's just really good. He's also got a good ultimate that provides inevitability for us. A lot of our Planeswalkers will help us draw cards and deal a bunch of damage if we have the emblem out, so Ob Nixilis, one of my favorites, and 2 black mana is a little prohibitive, but we've got Oath of Nissa, we've got Cinder Barrens Conduit, we've got Cultivator's Caravan. Shouldn't be too hard to get that Ob Nix on turn 5. Or sometimes even turn 4, which is really crazy. Another walker we can get on turn 4 is Nissa Vital Force here. She does cost 5 mana, but we got some ramp, and I really like Vital Force in this deck, but if you've been watching the channel, you know that Vital Force is a pet card of mine, and she's been trending down from $7.58 now to $5. And this card could actually be good any day now, depending on what gets released. I feel like this is a very, very strong Planeswalker who does a lot of things. First of all, the ability to untap a land and make it a 5/5 is great. Big 5/5 meat swinging in, that's fantastic, right? And the ability to get permanents back from your graveyard is especially good in this deck where we're playing almost exclusively permanents. A lot of them being Planeswalkers. If they manage to kill a Planeswalker, get it back with a Vital Force. Pretty great. And the ultimate is awesome and can be gotten to with an Oath of Gideon the turn it comes into play. There is another 5-drop Planeswalker in the deck. We found the budget for a one-of Jace Unraveler of Secrets. He's almost $9.50 right now and $10 depending on where you get him. All these prices come from TCGplayer.com. Not a plug, just letting you know where the prices come from. But in any case, Jace is one of the better and most played Planeswalkers in certain decks in this format right now. And a lot like Ob Nixilis, he gets his card advantage. He removes creatures, in this case for just the turn. But in some ways can protect our own creatures. And his ultimate is fantastic in this case. Doesn't provide the inevitability of an Ob Nix ultimate, but again, goes really, really well with Dovin Baan and shuts the opponent out of playing spells for the rest of the game if you can put that together. But mostly we're looking for his excellent ability to get his card advantage. over the game, which is just, his card advantage is fantastic. And he can remove creatures. I mean, again, what more could you ask for? Jace is amazing. And into the 6-drop Planeswalkers, we're playing 4 of those, as a matter of fact. We're going to play 2 copies of Sorin, Grim Nemesis to start those off. Sorin is just as good as he ever was, man. He's got a +1 that not only gives you card advantage, but can hit them for damage. That's just really good, especially in this deck, where we're running a bunch of 5 and 6 and 4 drops, you know. So that +1 can do serious damage to them. You can also just blow away a creature. That's really good. And we've got a decent life total. His ultimate's great, you know. So, really, really like this Sorin, obviously. And I don't know why people just stopped playing him when white-black control stopped being a thing. But again, good news for us is price tag dipped considerably. And now we've got one of the best Planeswalkers in the format for less than $5. Speaking of one of the best Planeswalkers in the format for under $5, we're going to finish off these Planeswalkers by talking about 2 copies of Chandra Flamecaller here. Chandra Flamecaller, again, just as good as she ever was, man. This format has actually slowed down considerably from where we started with all the red-white vehicles decks and red-black aggro and stuff. Now, we're in a format where we can breathe a little despite turn 4 Emrakuls from Aetherworks Marvel occasionally. But we get a few more turns to operate, and in that environment, especially with the ramp we're carrying, Chandra Flamecaller is really, really good on naked board. She's insane because her +1's crazy. And her +1, by the way, just a little bit of tech, can crew Cultivator's Caravan. If you want to, that's cool. Right there. She can also let us pitch our hand, draw new cards. That's always good. But the real attraction here is the ability to sweep the board of all the small creatures. If we can get to a Chandra, and we are playing against these aggro decks, then we can reset the board and have a much better chance of winning. Before you ask, the Planeswalker pack Chandra and Nissa were in the deck to begin with preliminarily, but they just really didn't do what I wanted them to do. I'm thinking about a one-off Pyro Genius in the sideboard, but she hasn't made it yet because she's a little bit over budget. In this deck at least. But at least Pyro Genius can deal damage to opponents and Planeswalkers. That's not bad. And it can kill creatures outright without having to, you know, neg everything and kill your Servant of the Conduits. So there is an argument for Pyro Genius. I'm just not thinking that it's good enough. And Nissa Nature's Artisan is kind of even, I don't like it anywhere near as much as I like Pyro Genius. They ultimately didn't make the cut, but they are cheap, about $3.50 a piece right now, and playable if you don't have some of these walkers. There's 26 carefully selected lands right here in the mana base. Got to play Aether Hub. I feel like we also have to play Evolving Wilds since our fetch land can go get any source that we need at the time. In Prairie Stream, we're going to splurge on because we've got like Ceremonious Rejection on the board. We want to be able to play that by at least turn 3, and we can do it in this case. We've got a lot of basic lands in this mana base, if you haven't noticed, even though it's a multicolor deck. Because we've got the Evolving Wilds to go get them, and I want especially green mana, sometimes on turn 1 or 2, untapped. So we're playing a fair amount of force in the deck, and a bunch of you know, lands that Evolving Wilds can go get. But if you had money, you could always jazz it up, and I would start here. Here's the sideboard right here. We'll start with Ceremonious Rejection, which is one of the better sideboard pieces in the format, and it's the entire reason, besides Negate, but mostly Rejection, that we're playing that one island that you see sticking out like a sore thumb down there. I want another way to get blue mana, a 12th blue source after boards, because Rejection will often come in. You know, it's good against Emrakul, it's good against Aetherworks Marvel, it's good against Copter, you know, so just so many good things that Ceremonious Rejection answers right now. I feel like it's got to be in the board. Fragmentized, ditto, you know, everything except Emrakul I just named, it kills for just the 1 mana, play it. Immolating Glare, pretty good against all those small creature decks, and we're mostly worrying about creatures that attack anyway, because, you know, we don't want them to kill our Planeswalkers. So, Immolating Glare has definitely got a lot of play in it, although you could play Radiant Flames in this slot if you're comfortable producing red mana. Which you could be if you, again, added a couple of bucks to the mana base. But notice that all the non-Planeswalker cards in the deck were green and white. Those are our main colors, and I don't want to, outside of Planeswalkers, do too much outside of those 2 colors. That's why blue is a little bit more featured in the mana base, because Ceremonious Rejection and Negate are both cards that we want to play that don't cost either green or white, but I think they're that important. Negate, I just talked about it there, can counter Planeswalkers, it can counter Aetherworks Marvel, it can counter Smuggler's Copter, it can counter a lot of different stuff in this format, not to mention removal, so Negate all day. Stasis Snare can also take out Emrakul, they'll still get to take over your turn, but it gets around the Pro Instance clause, we'll play Stasis Snare. And finally, Appetite for the Unnatural, for all the things I've been naming this entire time. And here are the power rankings for the deck right here. A final score of 57, which seems fairly low for a $100 price tag, but you get to play with all these super fun Planeswalkers, and the deck can just do crazy stuff. Sometimes you'll have 4 or 5 Planeswalkers on the battlefield, depending on how far the game has gone up to that point. We don't have a whole lot of hardcore aggro decks in this format, and a lot of decks will let us breathe up until turn 4 or 5, you know. So, not a bad deck to play right now at your FNM, especially depending on what your FNM is like, you know. If you got a lot of these turn 4 Emrakul, Aetherworks, Marvel decks, then that kind of sucks, but we've got some love in the board against those things. Really, we got some hate in the board against those things. And we're pretty versatile because a lot of our Planeswalkers do a bunch of different stuff, from drawing cards to killing creatures to gaining us life to a bunch of other weird stuff with their ultimates. So we've got a lot of versatility and a fair amount of defense because a lot of those Planeswalkers will kill creatures. So we're doing a bunch of stuff in this deck if you haven't noticed. That said, the deck is a little bit top heavy because of all of those Planeswalkers. We try to help that out with the ramp and the mana fixing, but honestly, playing, you know, what is it, 6 drops and a bunch of 5 drops, a bunch of 4 drops, the game sometimes will not start for us until turn 4, and that can be a real problem against certain decks. That said, only $100 for a Super Friends deck. I think this breaks the record for the cheapest Super Friends deck of all time. And after you're tapped out buying, tapped out, cute. After you're tapped out buying Christmas presents for everybody and stuff, you know, $100 isn't too much to ask if you want to have a bunch of fun with a crazy Planeswalker deck. Again, 16 Planeswalkers. That's crazy. That's like 1 out of every 4 cards that you draw, basically. So take the oath, try it out, let me know how you feel about it in the comments section. I hope that you guys have a Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy Boxing Day, Happy Saturnalia, Winter Solstice, whatever you celebrate. Hope you have a happy one. We just did stockings, actually, tonight. I got some cool stuff. I got a Dragon Ball Z air freshener for the car. It's Dragon Balls, that's really cool. I got a 90s nostalgia pack for Cards Against Humanity. That's pretty awesome, too. And I got some Pocky. So, nothing but some good stuff and some assorted candy and stuff. Hope your Christmas is as good as mine so far. I'll see you guys later. I'm Deb from SBMTG. If you enjoyed the content, like the content, hit thumbs up. Sub if you're new. Hit that bell to get the notifications, because that's how YouTube wants us to do it nowadays. And I'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching, my wizards.